Today's small book, bound in soft vellum, sits inside a climate-controlled vault at Yale University. 240 pages. Roots that belong to no known plant. Stars that match no known sky. A script made of characters nobody on Earth has ever read aloud. Cryptographers from the United States Army have studied it. Codebreakers who cracked Japanese naval ciphers in World War II have studied it. Medieval scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the Vatican have studied it. 6 university research teams, over 100 academic papers, more than a century of failure. And here is the detail nobody can explain. Statisticians have confirmed the text follows the patterns of a real language, not gibberish, not random scribbles, something with grammar, structure, meaning this is the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript. In 1912, a Polish-Lithuanian book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich traveled to the Villa Mondragone, a Jesuit college outside Rome. The Jesuits, short on funds, were quietly selling off part of their library. Voynich was exactly the kind of buyer they wanted. He had spent decades building a reputation as one of Europe's most successful antiquarian booksellers, with a gallery in London that supplied rare manuscripts to the era's wealthiest private collectors. Voynich's own history reads like fiction. Born in 1865 in the Russian Empire, he joined revolutionary movements against Tsarist rule as a young man and was arrested multiple times. He was sentenced to exile in Siberia. He escaped, made his way across Europe, and eventually settled in London, where he married Ethel Lillian Booley, daughter of the mathematician George Booley, and later the author of the best-selling novel The Gadfly. By the time he walked into the Villa Mondragone, Voynich had reinvented himself completely, from political prisoner to dealer in the most exclusive corner of the rare book trade. Among the manuscripts he purchased that day was a small, unassuming volume. No title, no author, no date, just 240 vellum pages, covered edge to edge in a flowing, looping script that resembled no European alphabet, paired with hundreds of illustrations, plants that didn't match any known species, naked women bathing in green liquid inside strange tubular structures, circular diagrams resembling star charts or astrological wheels. Voynich knew immediately he had something unusual. What he claimed to know about its origin is where the story gets complicated. Tucked inside the manuscript was a letter, dated 1665 or 1666, written by a Prague scholar named Johannes Marcus Marci. The letter was addressed to Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit polymath in Rome famous across Europe for his attempts to decode Egyptian hieroglyphs. In it, Marci explained that the manuscript had once belonged to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, who reigned from 1576 to 1612. According to the letter, Rudolph believed the book was the work of the 13th century English friar Roger Bacon, a genuine historical figure associated with early experimental science, and the emperor had paid 600 gold ducats for it. At the time, that was a fortune, enough to buy a small castle. This was the story Voynich told the world, a lost work by one of history's great minds. Hidden in a Habsburg palace, mysterious enough that even an emperor's scholars couldn't read it. It was a sale pitch. It was also, in its broad strokes, supported by an actual surviving document. Both things were true at once, and untangling which parts were fact and which were embellishment would occupy scholars for the next 100 years. Voynich brings the manuscript back to the United States and begins showing photostats to academics, hoping someone can place it, date it, translate it. Word spreads through the small world of medieval scholarship. A genuinely undeciphered text, with a provenance reaching back to a Holy Roman Emperor, is the kind of object careers get built on. In 1919, a University of Pennsylvania professor named William Romaine Newbold takes up the challenge. Newbold is respected, careful, methodical. He spends years studying the manuscript's script and eventually announces a breakthrough. The looping characters aren't a language at all, but a cipher, with each visible letter built from tiny shorthand strokes invisible to the naked eye, decodable only under magnification. Newbold claims to have decoded passages describing telescopic observations of the Andromeda Galaxy, centuries before any telescope existed capable of seeing it. The claim is explosive. It would mean Roger Bacon possessed scientific knowledge a third of a millennium ahead of his time. Newbold dies in 1926. After his death, other scholars examine his methodology more carefully. What they find is not a hidden cipher. It is Newbold seeing patterns that exist only in his own interpretation, projecting structure onto random variations in 13th century handwriting. His decoded Andromeda passage was not extracted from the text. It was constructed from it, the same way a person can stare at clouds long enough to see a face. This becomes a pattern that repeats for the next century, with names changing but the shape of the failure staying the same. In the 1940s, codebreakers from the U.S. Army Signal Intelligence Service, fresh from cracking Japanese and German military ciphers during World War II, take a crack at the Voynich text in their off hours. Men who broke some of the most sophisticated encryption systems ever devised cannot make the manuscript yield a single confirmed word. In the 1970s, a researcher named John Stoko proposes that the text is actually Ukrainian, written without vowels. His translations, when scrutinized, turn out to require selective reinterpretation of the same symbols to mean different things depending on what sentence he needs them to produce. By the time computational analysis becomes possible in the 1990s and 2000s, the manuscript has defeated cryptographers, linguists, botanists trying to identify the plants, and astronomers trying to match the star charts to any known medieval sky map. Carbon dating performed in 2009 places the vellum itself between 1404 and 1438, more than a century after Roger Bacon's death, ruling out Voynich's own sales narrative as literally true. Whatever the book is, it is not a lost work of Roger Bacon. And then, in 2003, a researcher named Gordon Rugg, working at Keele University, approaches the problem from a different angle entirely. Instead of trying to translate the text, Rugg asks a colder question. Can a meaningless text be made to look exactly like Voynich's, using only tools available in the early 1400s? Rugg builds something called a Cardan grill, a perforated table of word fragments dating to authentic 16th century cryptographic methods, adapted to work with a grid of syllable-like strings. By sliding the grill across the table in patterns and recording what shows through the holes, he can generate page after page of text. Text with the same letter frequency patterns, the same word length distribution, the same statistical fingerprints that make the real Voynich manuscript look like a genuine language to computer analysis. In a matter of hours, Rugg produces gibberish that fools the same statistical tests the manuscript had passed for decades. The question stops being what does it say? The question becomes, is there anything to say at all? Most people who have heard of the Voynich manuscript know the surface version, an old book nobody can read. What almost none of them know is how contested the evidence actually is, on every side of the argument. Start with the case for a real language. In 2013, a study by Marcelo Montemurro and Damon Zanet, published in the journal PLOS One, applied information theory to the text and found that the distribution and clustering of word frequencies matched patterns found in real natural languages far more closely than in random or meaningless text. Genuine languages organize meaningful words in clusters around specific topics. Gibberish does not. The Voynich text, in their analysis, behaved like something with semantic content. This finding sits in direct tension with Gordon Rugg's table and grill experiment. Both results are published, both are methodologically serious, and they point in opposite directions. One says the text has the statistical fingerprint of meaning. The other says meaningless text can be engineered to fake that exact fingerprint using period-appropriate tools. The manuscript has not chosen a side. The disagreement itself is part of the unresolved record. Then there is the matter of Folio 116V, the manuscript's final page, the only page containing what appears to be readable, if badly damaged, Latin alphabet script mixed in with Voynich's characters. Scholars have spent decades on this single page alone, because it is the closest thing the manuscript offers to a key. Some researchers have proposed it reads as a kind of medical or herbal recipe. Others believe it is simply a later reader's annotation, scrawled by someone who owned the book centuries after it was made and was just as confused as everyone since. Even the individual words remain disputed, since the page is so damaged that letter-by-letter readings vary significantly between transcribers using identical high-resolution scans. Radiocarbon dating adds another layer most casual accounts skip entirely. The 2009 analysis, conducted at the University of Arizona, didn't just date the vellum. Subsequent multispectral imaging analysis by researchers including Lisa Fadgen-Davis and others has examined the ink and identified at least 4, possibly 5, different scribal hands at work across the manuscript. This means the book was not produced by a single eccentric author working alone. It was a coordinated, multi-person production, likely created in a workshop setting, with enough planning and division of labor that someone needed to commission it, organize it, and presumably understood what it was meant to communicate, or at least convincingly fake. The botanical illustrations present their own layer of contested evidence. Of the manuscript's roughly 130 plant drawings, botanists have proposed matches to known medieval European or even New World species for perhaps a third of them, with significant disagreement even among specialists about which matches are credible. A persistent minority theory holds that several plants resemble species native to Mexico and Central America, which would place the manuscript's content after 1492, fitting the radiocarbon date, but reopening the question of who in Europe would have had access to detailed botanical knowledge of the Americas this early, and why they would encode it in cipher rather than write it openly, the way contemporary botanists like Francisco Herndez did just decades later. The astronomical and cosmological diagrams resist easy explanation too. The circular charts include arrangements that some researchers connect to medieval zodiac traditions, but the specific configurations, including apparent additions of unusual celestial bodies and non-standard groupings of stars, don't cleanly match any surviving astronomical manuscript from the period. Whether this reflects an invented cosmology, a coded system, or simple artistic license remains genuinely open. What researchers agree on, separate from any translation theory, is the engineering of the page layout itself. The text fills the page in a way that respects word boundary spacing rules, consistent with how real medieval scribes wrote, rather than how a hoaxer with no linguistic training might fill space at random. Whoever produced this book either understood, at a structural level, how real written language behaves on a page, or accidentally reproduced that structure through some other generative method nobody has yet identified. This is the actual state of the evidence, not a single confirmed translation, not a single discredited hoax theory that fully explains every anomaly, but a pile of partial, contradictory, methodologically serious findings that refuse to assemble into one clean answer. The manuscript has a way of consuming the people who take it seriously, and the toll is part of the story too. William Newbold's reputation never recovered from his Andromeda Galaxy claim. He spent the final years of his career defending a theory other scholars had already dismantled, and after his death, his closest academic ally, a philosopher named Roland Grubb Kent, spent considerable effort trying to walk back the damage to Newbold's legacy in published rebuttals. A respected academic career reduced in the historical record to a cautionary tale about pattern-seeking and self-deception. John Stocchio self-published his Ukrainian translation theory after mainstream academic journals declined to engage with it, and it remains to this day. A footnote cited mainly as an example of how badly motivated reasoning can distort even a careful researcher's work when they become convinced they're close to a breakthrough. More recently, the manuscript has become a magnet for high-profile claims that collapse almost as fast as they spread. In 2019, a University of Bristol academic named Gerard Cheshire published a paper claiming to have fully translated the manuscript as a kind of proto-Romance language tied to medieval Mediterranean female health practices. The University of Bristol's own press office promoted the claim publicly. Within days, medieval linguists and Voynich researchers worldwide published detailed rebuttals identifying fundamental inconsistencies in Cheshire's method, including translations that shifted meaning depending on what result he needed. The university quietly removed its press release. Cheshire's paper remains published in an academic journal, technically peer-reviewed, and almost universally rejected by specialists in the field. In 2017, a separate claim circulated that the manuscript was a guide to women's health and herbal medicine, compiled for medieval royal women, based on research by Nicholas Gibbs published in the Times Literary Supplement. That theory, too, fell apart under scrutiny once specialists noted that Gibbs's supposed translations of specific passages didn't match the actual text closely enough to be verified by anyone else attempting to replicate his method. The pattern by now is unmistakable. Roughly once every few years since the 1920s, someone credible publishes a confident solution. The claim generates headlines. Specialists examine the methodology. The claim does not survive contact with peer review. The manuscript outlasts the theory, the same way it has outlasted every theory that came before. What has changed in recent years is the sophistication of the tools being thrown at the problem. Machine learning models trained on hundreds of known historical languages and ciphers have been applied to Voynichese, searching for statistical relationships humans might miss. So far, none of these computational approaches have produced a translation that other researchers can independently verify, though they have refined understanding of the text's internal structure, including confirming that certain symbol sequences behave like genuine prefixes and suffixes. The kind of internal grammar a constructed hoax language would be unusually sophisticated to fake convincingly. The manuscript has also escaped the narrow world of academic cryptography and become something closer to cultural shorthand, a reference point for the very idea of an unsolvable problem, appearing in novels, television, and recurring as the subject of new documentary treatments almost every year, each one promising the audience a fresh angle on the same fundamental impossibility. Yale's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library, which now holds the manuscript and has digitized every page in high resolution, reports that researchers from around the world continue submitting access requests and analysis proposals. The book has never been more available, every page viewable for free by anyone with an internet connection, and total transparency has changed nothing about whether it can be read. Whether the Voynich manuscript can ever be solved depends on something almost embarrassingly basic. Nobody knows for certain there is anything inside it to solve. If it is a genuine, meaningful text in an unknown language or sophisticated cipher, then in principle, given enough time, enough comparative data, or the right computational breakthrough, it could eventually yield. If it is an elaborate hoax, constructed using a method like Rugg's table and grill technique, or something more sophisticated nobody has reconstructed yet, then no amount of analysis will ever produce a translation, because there was never a message to find. Both possibilities remain fully alive. The manuscript offers no evidence that definitively closes off either path. There is something particular about a mystery that resists, not because the evidence is missing, but because there is too much of it, pointing in directions that contradict each other. Most unsolved cases eventually thin out. Witnesses die, records get lost, the available evidence shrinks until there is simply not enough left to reach a conclusion. The Voynich manuscript works in reverse. The evidence keeps growing. Better imaging technology reveals more about the ink in the scribal hands. Statistical analysis grows more sophisticated with each computational advance. And still, more than 100 years after Wilfrid Voynich carried it out of an Italian villa, the central question hasn't moved an inch. Is there a message here, or only the shape of one? Perhaps that is what makes this case different from a ghost story or a vanished ship. There is no need to believe in anything supernatural to find it unsettling. The manuscript asks a quieter, more uncomfortable question. How would you know, with total certainty, the difference between language and its absence if someone 400 years ago understood exactly how to make the second one indistinguishable from the first? Every researcher who has approached this book carried the same assumption, that careful enough attention would eventually produce an answer. Newbold believed it. Stoico believed it. Cheshire believed it. Each of them found patterns. Each of them was, by every available measure, wrong, or at least unable to prove they were right. The manuscript doesn't punish curiosity. It simply absorbs it, page after page, without confirming whether anyone has ever come close. Somewhere in a temperature-controlled vault in New Haven, Connecticut, 240 pages continue to sit exactly as they have for centuries, fully visible, fully documented, and entirely unread. The not knowing has outlasted every person who tried to end it.